Welcome to the Darkstream, VoxDay, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. Thanks for tuning in. Got a busy day on Unauthorized today. I think Tony, our new theology edition, did his stream earlier today. I think Stefan's streaming now, and I think we've got a couple more, at least one more, coming up later. So good to see things getting active. Until the audio is good, until the video is good. That's excellent. Not a lot of announcements on the Castalia front. We're just continuing to move forward. I guess there is the one announcement, obviously, that studies in the Napoleonic Wars has been bound. People are already starting to receive War and Peace Volumes 1 and 2. And we're hoping to also get Dracula and maybe Swiss Family Robinson out before the end of the year. So it'll be a little tight, but we are seeking to do that. News is pretty busy. It's really interesting to see how little interest there is in the US election over here. Whether it's in Britain, whether it's in the continent, people are not really that interested in the election, probably because everybody pretty much understands that they're fake. I mean, there's no question that if there was a legitimate election, that Donald Trump would win. This is by an even bigger margin than he won in 2020. But they put in the fake Biden regime. And now it's pretty clear that behind the scenes, it's been agreed that Trump is going to be permitted to take the presidency, or at least that's how it appears. But you can't take these things too seriously. I mean, they are serious things, but you can't take them at face value, because the closer that you look at any of these things. I mean, you can go back to JFK's election. You can possibly go back even further and see very clear signs that things are not as the official story would have it. And so, it's been clear that Joe Biden hasn't been running things at all. It's been very clear that there have been at least 6 Joe Bidens passed off on the American public as the supposedly elected president. Kamala Harris has been passed off as a black woman when I don't believe she's any more black than I am. She's Indian Indian dot, not feather. But she's not black. Any more than Elon Musk is black just because he's African, right? So anyhow, I mean, the whole thing is one fiction stacked on top of a lie, stacked on top of an exaggeration. Exactly what's true, exactly what's not true. We have no idea. It was back on, I believe, September 29th that the first rumor that Netanyahu had actually been injured or possibly even killed in the missile attack on the Israeli airport was first made by some fairly out there, it was like Hal Turner, Ben Fulford type stuff that has not been reliable in the past, but does occasionally get something right early. So I just noted it. I didn't say anything about it. I didn't put it on the blog. I didn't believe it, but I did note it because they do occasionally get things early. So it's been interesting to see that there's more and more stuff coming out about how Netanyahu hasn't been actually appearing in public. The videos that feature him appear to be a heavier body double. I don't know. Maybe the guy just has been stress eating. We don't know. My point is, we don't even know if the political leader of one of the nation states that is at the fulcrum of current political events is even alive. And we can't trust any of the media, not the US media, not the Israeli media, not the Arab media. We can't trust any of the media to report it properly. Sam says, and fake Trump is making tons of appearances. Is this the shorter Trump that always says ridiculous things that would tend to turn off conservatives? We did vaccines, and we're going to vaccinate everybody before we send them to war for Israel. I mean, short Trump, yeah. So, it's impossible to believe any of this stuff because it's not necessarily much more realistic than the average movie. And to a certain extent, it is a scripted movie. 2 Acre North Dakota Bear says, missed that. You said Trump is going to be allowed in again. It looks that way. It really looks that way. Now, obviously, there's this tremendous amount of voter fraud that is being uncovered even now. Certainly, we're seeing, I mean, they're talking about how, well, we're not going to be able to count our votes for 13 days afterwards. What that tells me is that the faction that is not okay with Trump is fighting hard to try to prevent it from happening somehow. This is funny. Sam points out he met with Zelensky and was only 3 inches taller than Zelensky. Okay. I knew that the fake Trump was short. I had no idea that he was that short. You would have thought they would have at least put him in like Tom Cruise heels or stilts or something. Let him stand on a box. But that's how absurd this thing is. I mean, we know that Donald Trump is a tall man. We've seen this tall guy named Donald Trump for decades. And they don't even hesitate to try to pass off some guy who's like 5'8". Dan says, Vox is taller than many Trump. Well, I don't quite understand why this whole meme has gotten around about me being either short or fat. I mean, I'm 5'9", 180. I'm literally the size of an NFL cornerback. I'm not huge. I'm not super tall or anything, but I mean, I weigh 5 pounds more than I did when I was, no, I guess in fairness, I weigh 10 pounds more than when I was, ripped and fighting in the ring. And I also, that was before I mean, I'm not saying that I'm in ideal condition. I'm not, but it's just always so strange to me that these, these ridiculous gammas like leap on stuff. I mean, and just, I mean, when I talk about being shorter than my friends, remember, I grew up in Minnesota. Everybody's 6'2" there. I was kind of surprised when I went out east for college, and I was used to always being more or less the same, roughly the same height as most of the women that I dated. Sometimes they were an inch or two taller, sometimes an inch or three shorter. But then you go out to the East Coast or you go to Japan. It was really funny playing football. I played a little bit of American football with a Japanese team, and it was funny because I was a linebacker there, like linebacker sized running back. It was a lot of fun. But Iron Worker Bear says 5'9" is the cutoff. Any less and I wouldn't tune in. So we've got a height supremacist bear. Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, think about it. Suppose Owen Benjamin suddenly appeared on some kind of stream with me, and you could see from the stream that we were the same height. I mean, nobody would have the slightest doubt that it wasn't Owen, right? So how are we supposed to believe for a second that this is the real Donald Trump, especially when he's saying stuff that appears designed to prevent people from voting for him? I mean, to me, it's pretty obvious that short Trump is being employed by the folks who are also trying to steal the election, who are being caught with all these extra ballots and all this sort of thing. In fact, in one of my old stomping grounds, Edina, which is a nice, formerly very nice, wealthy suburb on the southwest side of Minneapolis. We used to go to church there for a couple of years, and in front of the city hall, they had a van or something or a car that had an open box of blank ballots just left out. It's crazy. So there's obviously a lot of stuff going on that we're not privy to the details. The point is we really can't take anything that we see or are told at face value. I wish I could tell you exactly what the truth is, but I don't know. One thing that's interesting, though, there's some interesting developments out of Europe. Some just happening yesterday and today. France, of all places, has just done two interesting things. One, they've followed Germany's lead and they've shut the borders. This is not a surprise. I think I told you this several years ago. Especially between France and Spain, you could see that they were rebuilding the borders. They were rebuilding the big stations and everything. So I figured it was just a matter of time, and sure enough, that time has now arrived. And so the Schengen era of free movement throughout Western Europe is already dead. I'll admit, it was really nice being able to drive down into Italy, especially down to Malpensa and Linate, and not have a line at the border. But is it worth the price that's been paid? Absolutely not. Is it worth the significant decline in the quality of life that is observable pretty much all across Europe because of the migrant invasion? Absolutely not. There's train stations in small town Switzerland that you just flat out would not allow a woman to walk alone now because there's 5 or 10 migrants just hanging around doing nothing. And so it's much worse in the larger cities, of course. And so some kind of reckoning is coming. Exactly what it'll be, We don't know. But the current powers that be know and understand that they probably cannot survive doing what they're doing. The polls, they're already having to pull out every stop. They're having to cheat in the elections. They're having to play post-electoral political games to prevent the people, who've been elected from actually obtaining power. But that's just a stopgap move. That they're gambling that, well, somehow a miracle will happen and these problems that we created will magically resolve themselves the way that the theoreticians told them that they would. But they're just going to keep getting crushed. And no amount of trying to hand votes to invaders is going to work, because of course they're not going to as the DFL party learned in Minnesota, they're not going to vote for the people that brought them in. They don't have any gratitude. They're going to take power themselves, which is only going to infuriate even further the people who might have supported their predecessors. That's where the political divide's coming from. Sam summarizes it well. He says they've removed the public's ability to suspend their disbelief. You can't. I mean, I was talking to Owen the other day, and he said, reality has passed us by. No matter how skeptical we were about the official story, no matter how absurd we thought the official story was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the official story now is so nonsensical, so obviously absurd, that even an absolute normie can't believe it anymore. So anyhow, the other big news out of France is that they voted to become the third nation in the world after Eritrea and the USA to initiate citizenship-based taxation, which means that all the French citizens who move to Monaco or move elsewhere in the world are going to be hit with French taxes. This is probably a desperation move. It might even be somewhat connected to the borders to try to keep French citizens in. I'm a little skeptical about that, but either way, it's a pretty disastrous move for the French, because now they can't escape it anymore, and French taxes are pretty steep, so I don't know whether it's going to hold up to the inevitable challenges, political and judicial, that will no doubt be presented. But Silent Draco says, Babylon Bee passed the Onion as the paper of record. Maybe. I'm not really a fan of the Babylon Bee. They're what I would consider to be a fake alternative. The founder, I believe, said something about how anyone who criticizes Israel is evil, or something to that effect. So it's just another Breitbart. It's just another Ben Shapiro. Just another gatekeeping organization, in my opinion. They've got some good writers. They've got some things that are funny, but the Onion used to too. I don't think that the Babylon Bee is, now that we already know that the Babylon Bee is compromised on at least Middle East related issues. I doubt it's going to stay very amusing on the other issues as well. My favorite Onion stuff was the news, not just the autistic reporter. The Autistic Reporter was great, but the fake morning show was hilarious. They really did a great job with that. So, and then the big news of the day, and we're gonna go to the window on this one, is the BRICS announcement, the BRICS meeting. They condemned unlawful Western sanctions. So that's interesting because you've got I mean, if you're not counting just the formal members, but if you're also counting the countries that want to join, more than half the globe is openly condemning Western sanctions as unlawful. That's a pretty big deal. Let's look at the multipolar world order, leading role of emerging economies and Western debt. Key takeaways from Putin's BRICS address. And the key takeaways are multipolar world order being formed. A multipolar model is being formed, which is launching a new wave of growth, primarily due to the countries of the global south and east, and naturally the BRICS countries. So what they're saying is basically Europe is done, the US is stagnant. If you want to grow, you're going to have to do business in the global south and east. I agree completely. That's why we have our own, we're launching our first Chinese line of books soon. And they're going to be excellent. And we're going to be among the few companies who can actually sell into China rather than buying from China. Because obviously they'll be able to do it cheaper, but they can't do it better. So, and of course, it'll get imitated and whatever, and that's fine. It's a pretty big market. You don't need to dominate it to do well. The leading role of BRICS. The BRICS economies have been demonstrating sufficient stability due to responsible macroeconomic and fiscal government policies. The average BRICS country growth in 2024-2025 is 3.8%, which is better than the global average of 3.25%. And obviously much better than you're going to see in Europe, which is contracting. Germany in particular is a total basket case right now. And Germany is historically the driver of the European economy. But this is the result of bad government. The Chinese have excellent government. The Russians have excellent government. The Germans have wildly retarded, self-destructive government. If you want to try to run an industrial economy on sunlight, that's going to work about as well as those people who believe that they could go without eating food and subsist on sunlight. It's not going to work. Can't work. Therefore, the trend for the BRICS leading role in the global economy will only strengthen. Well, they're already 36.7% of global GDP. The G7, including the US and everybody else, is barely above 30. That's probably going to increase to 45 versus 25 within the next 5 years. Where's the growth going to come from? There's no growth in the US. Do you think France is going to grow when they've launched this citizenship-based taxation? Absolutely not. Germany is actively contracting because they don't have inexpensive natural gas anymore. Sam says, it'll be interesting when the first EU country flips to BRICS. Absolutely. The interesting test is going to be Turkey. Turkey has been trying to join the EU for at least 12 years. The EU didn't want them because, of course, ironically enough, they didn't want to get flooded with Turks, which, of course, Angela Merkel did anyhow in 2015. But, so the interesting thing is going to be once, Turkey's a member of NATO. Is BRICS going to require Turkey to drop out of NATO or not to join? NATO's already said there's no problem with Turkey belonging to both. But I don't think that it serves the interests of BRICS to permit a NATO country, much less an EU country, to join. A man cannot serve two masters, after all. And so they might let Turkey join both. What's going to be really interesting, I think, is Hungary. Hungary would be the most obvious candidate to drop out, to quit the EU and join BRICS, which is actually the correct move for countries like Hungary, because the only reason they wanted to join EU was to get all the free money. Well, the money has turned out to be more expensive than it's worth, because you have to accept the whole Global Homo program to be in the EU. Poland, for example, traditionally very conservative Poland, just passed the first gay marriage law, I think last week. Part of the price, no doubt, for joining NATO, joining the EU, et cetera, et cetera. The EU's always been a terrible bet. The Swiss knew it when they rejected it in, I believe it was 2000 or 2002, I don't remember which, but the referendum. What was interesting about that referendum at the time is that the strongest vote against it was in the Italian region, which of course is very close to their cousins in Italy. And because they knew what the EU had done to Italy, they didn't want any part of it. And it was really brutal. The switch from the lira to the euro was terrible. It still has had terrible ramifications that last today. Hopefully, I always thought that Italy would be the first one out of the EU after Britain. But now that BRICS is providing such an interesting alternative, I could see a country like Hungary leaving the EU and joining BRICS sooner. West's unilateral sanctions and debt burden. The Russian president warned of a potential new global crisis, citing the growing debt burden in developed countries, unilateral sanctions, and protectionist policies as key threats. These factors are fragmenting international trade and foreign investment, particularly in developing nations. Yeah, I mean, the big advantage that BRICS has is that they're not all, in debt to the gills. Other than China, which does have a high degree of debt. But even that debt isn't foreign owned. If you believe the Keynesians, if you take the Keynesians at their word, which we are when we're talking about in terms like economic growth, debt doesn't matter as long as it's internal. Where debt becomes a weapon is when you owe it to external parties. Now, obviously, debt really does matter, but even under Keynesian terms, international debt is dangerous, and most of the G7 countries have a high level of external debt. I think Japan is getting up there again, but China is still, I believe, the leading holder of US debt. A new BRICS investment platform. Okay, whoop-de-damn-do. BRICS-based grain exchange. That's really interesting, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to remove the ability of the speculators from interfering with the price patterns. Is that possible? Hard to say. But they're going to start with grain, and then they're going to expand it to trade in other commodities like oil, gas, and precious metals. The initiative is aimed at protecting national markets from negative external interference, speculation, and attempts to cause artificial shortages. And they'll probably be successful in this because they're not subject to the same outdated capitalist dogma that still rules the West. One thing that those of us who were free marketeers missed conceptually. One thing that we missed is that as bad as the government is, giant international corporations, giant multinational corporations are worse. Google is actually worse than the US government because Google is even less accountable and is even less interested in what the American people have to say. The US government, obviously the current US government, doesn't give a damn about American interests, but they at least have to try to pretend that they do and at least try to fool enough people to get some buy-in to their policies. Google doesn't care. Facebook doesn't care. They're not run by Americans. They aren't American. They happen to be located in the United States. They're just there to, they're there for the same reason that, a farmer farms the field. They're just harvesting what they can while they can. AI Alliance, who cares? And transport. So, the most important thing is the way in which BRICS is providing a genuine alternative to the G7, to the EU, to the SWIFT banking system, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a fascinating time because it's going to be tremendous opportunities for some people, and it's also going to be very difficult economically for some of the places that are used to being the wealthiest places in the world. The banks are not going to be able to play their finance games anymore. It's very clear. The fact that they're already actively targeting speculators and bank transfer payments and stuff very strongly indicates that they know how the West was grappled beginning back in 1913. And they obviously have no intention of permitting, the key component in that clown world system, which is a private central bank. So the easiest way for you to tell whether a country is subject to clown world or not is, does it have a national bank, or does it have a private? Does it have a national central bank, or does it have a private central bank? And that whole thing about, well, it's very important that the central bank be independent. No, it's not. That's literally the worst possible thing, because you don't want the central bank controlling the entire money supply, only being answerable to a couple private foreigners. That's a disaster in the making. That's why the US in particular and the West in general are facing economic catastrophe. It's inevitable. Does that mean that anyone who's living in the West, like we do, is going to be ruined, and that the whole territory is going to become a wasteland? No, of course not. Just because things are not as easy as they have been during a period which has been the easiest and wealthiest in the entire history of man, does not mean that it's going to be, a Fallout type apocalypse. Stark notes something. Princes of the Yen, which by the way is an excellent book. If you have any interest in economics, you should read Princes of the Yen. It's all about the Bank of Japan's war with the Japanese Ministry of Finance to become independent, which is, of course, is why Japan is fully subject to clown world now, and is also why they've been in the economic doldrums for the past 30 years. So anyhow, that's all I've got for tonight. So who else is streaming right now? Is anyone else streaming right now? I think Stefan was. I don't know. Let me see if we got anybody else doing the same now here. unauthorized TV. Okay, Stefan is still streaming. I heard a rumor that Razorfist is going to start streaming again soon on unauthorized. So maybe it'll be tonight. Maybe it'll be later this week. But you know, exciting stuff, good stuff. You know, again, we appreciate everybody who was patient and stuck with us. Speaking of being patient and sticking with us, I just got the first finished alt hero novel from John De La Rose. So 5 years later, or whatever it's been, we're going to get that out very soon. We've already got the cover done. Just we need to do a quick editing pass, and then we'll get that out to all the backers. So we do deliver. We just sometimes take a lot longer than anyone would like. Anyhow, I'll give about 5 more minutes for questions. So if any of you want to fire some questions in, just get them in right away. Type them in now, and then I'll hit them one by one. Don't just wait. There's still a bit of a, we need to do something about reducing the delay on the chats, I think. Although for some reason we seem to have the delay on DLive as well. So either that or you guys just type very, very slowly. I don't know which it is, but it'd be good to pick up the speed a bit on some of those, just so we can get some better interactivity here. There's always this awkward moment of, well, if nobody's got a question, then we can just bring it to a close. But then you don't want to. Is there an alternative to debt equals money in the modern world? Well, there will be. It'll be interesting to see how the BRICS currencies are set up. There's obviously a belief that some of these currencies are going to be at least partially backed by gold. They could be backed by other things. But even just pure paper money isn't debt. And so that's always an option. The problem is once you give banks the ability to create money through loans, then Gresham's law, bad money tends to drive out good. We could test delay if you say 1 and we all type 1 at the same time. I suppose in theory we could do that. Make gasoline 25 cents again. Exactly. I mean, we'd all be better off, because all debt does and all inflation does is transfer the money to those who get to spend it first. The higher up the chain you are, the more value that your money has. So actually, I don't think it's necessary to, well, actually, we can go ahead. Let's go ahead and do the test. I'm going to say 1, and you go ahead and just type 1 right away. So I'll count to 3, and then I'll say 1. And then as soon as I say 1, you hit the 1. So, and I'll turn on my clock here so I can see. Okay, there we go. 1. Okay, so that's about a 9 to 10 second delay on DLive. And apparently nobody on unauthorized was paying attention. Oh, there we go, Stark. So it's about, okay, that explains it. It's about a 23 second delay on unauthorized and a 10 second delay on DLive. So anyhow, we'll look into that and see if we can do something about that. It's 2 to 7 seconds here. Well, it was, from what I saw, it was 23 seconds. So, so that's, anyhow, it's good. It's good data to have. We'll put it on the long list of things that we want to do. So, got another question here. Does the question have to be about economics? No, of course not. What's your favorite book you read this year? Well, I think, I'm going to just check here. I think probably it was Haruki Murakami, Absolutely on Music. It was either that or Princes of the Yen. But here, actually, we can go here and let's see what I read this year. So let's change the settings. So if we go down, actually I'm on the wrong side here, so we'll switch me. So if we go down here and look at the books. So these are the books I read this year. The WoW Diary actually was excellent. If you're all into video games, you got to read the WoW Diary. 50 Years of Text Games was quite good. I wouldn't say that you need to read it. The Wizard of the Kremlin as a novel was really good. Let's see, read a bunch of Monster Hunters, Japanese novels, some classic international novels, a lot of Hiromi Kawakami. I did not at all like A Confederacy of Dunces. I read a couple Neil Gaiman books, just to be fair. Blew through all the James Clavels, which are, they're good, they're fun. Pirate Freedom was a little disappointing on the Gene Wolfe side. Dragon Waiting I thought was a bit overrated by Mike Ford. Land of Blood and Honey, The History of Israel by Martin Van Krell was really good. But yeah, I would say that the best book I read, if I had to pick one, was, well, I'll pick one nonfiction, one, actually they're both nonfiction. Okay. The best book I read, the one I enjoyed the most was it was the Absolutely on Music by Haruki Murakami. Princes of the Yen, I think, is the most important book I read this year. And the best novel was I would say the best novel was probably On London. No, I'm going to go with The Wizard of the Kremlin by Giuliano da Empoli. So that's my answer. I'm not a great person to ask about books because, as you can see, it's tough. What's the next book after War and Peace? Well, we already announced that, didn't we? Let's go back and see. I want to double check. I'm pretty sure I know, but just to make sure that I'm not putting out false information. Okay. Over 2,000 subscribers to Castalia Library. That's great. Okay, so the Castalia Library list, the current book. After War and Peace. So the next one to ship is Dracula. And then after that, we'll probably ship The Swiss Family Robinson. That's done. That's just about ready to go. And the newest book that we announced, the September-October book, is Jane Eyre. So we're usually about a year behind in getting them out the door. It's just how long it takes. So how far will the Vikings go this season? I think they will probably win the division. If I had to guess, I would say probably lose in the NFC Championship game. But it's going to be tough because Green Bay, I mean, they're in the toughest division in the league. Detroit's good. I mean, Detroit's really good. Green Bay's good. And the Chicago Bears are not bad. So there are rumors that they might actually trade for Stafford. If they get Stafford, I think they've got a shot at winning the Super Bowl. It's hard to believe that they would. You and Ethan Van Sciver seem to have patched things up. Yes, we have. Any potential projects soon? Not that I'm aware of. I mean, Ethan's pretty busy. You know, if he ever wants me to, um, to contribute to a project of his, or if he's ever willing to do a cover for us or something, that'd be great. I don't think that um, he's ever likely to illustrate a project for us because he's not the fastest illustrator, and he's got so many of his own projects he has to get done. I just don't see how he'd have the time to do something with Archaven. But I'm totally open to it. You know, we've got some interesting projects that we'll be announcing reasonably soon. And don't forget, if you haven't backed Hypergamos Sigma game yet, you should really think about doing that. What's your favorite Tanith Lee book? I like The Secret Books of Paradise. Probably Book of the Damned. I mean, they're all three of the four, I think, are really good. I'm never really sure how the books, what counts as a Tanith Lee book in that regard, because the Secret Books of Paradise are 4 books, but they're published in they were published in 2 volumes. They were published in 4 different volumes. They were published in 1 big volume. Because there's the Book of the Dead, Book of the Damned, and then 2 others that I've. But I mean, all that stuff is good. The Tales of the Flat Earth are good. Her fairy tales are amazingly good, if extraordinarily dark. I'm not a big fan of her children's stuff, which it just seems like a really bad idea, right? And I'm also not a big fan of her early sword and sorcery stuff. Have you ever tested your reading speed in words per minute? And if so, what is it? Let me check the blog here. I think that I seem to recall that it was. I remember that I had it tested when I was a kid, and it was something like. I remember it being like well over 1,000, like 1,100, 1,200. But I don't. And then I went and tested it maybe 5-10 years ago. Nothing there. I thought I might have posted it here at some point in time. Let's see here. Okay. Nothing there. Let's try Word. If I recall correctly, about 1,100 per minute. So. Speed reading. There we go. Okay. Yeah. 1,194 words per minute. And that was with 100% recall. So he says that's insane. Average word per minute is something like 150. Yeah, that sounds about right. Most people have a hard time. Like they'll hand me a piece of paper and I'll read it and then I'll hand it back to them and they're like, no, read it. And I always say I did. And then they inevitably have to like try to quiz me a bit. And of course, I mean, I just read it. Of course I know. Of course I can answer any questions from it. This was very, very valuable when we were involved in the various legal processes. I probably would have been an excellent lawyer just for that reason alone, just being able to go through stuff faster. But it's just something that you can either do or you don't. I mean, I can't. The only thing I know unusual about my reading is that I learned to read when I was 3. and I was reading like regular books by the time I was 5. So, you know, I used to win the MS Readathon when we had it in elementary school every year, which was cool because I got to meet Matt Blair from the Vikings. That was like one of the high points of my childhood. Do you think the SSH breakdown of managerial class is drastically different in corporations versus family-owned businesses? Yes, because I think that the family-owned businesses tend to gravitate more towards a proper SSH hierarchy, whereas the managerial class weeds out alphas. You know, they're penalized. So, anyhow, on that note, I wish you all a good evening. I'm Vox Day, and this is the Darkstream.